second session now. And it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague Jane Cornick, who's here from the Trade Directorate. She's a senior economist and policy analyst and has been leading a lot of the work on women in trade. So we've invited her today to share with you some of that work. And it's really exciting what they're doing. They're just finishing a large multi-country project that I'm sure she will mention. So thanks for being here, Jane. I pass it over to you.
Thanks, David, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'll just give you a few of the highlights of what some of the research that we've done on women in trade. If you could bring up the slides, that would be great. So we've done quite a bit of work on women in trade and in different aspects, looking at how women are represented in trade. If those slides are coming up, that would be great. And we've applied our framework of analysis of women in trade to a number of country studies. So one is in New Zealand, looking at specifically women's engagement in trade in New Zealand. And another one that we are just finishing is looks at 7 Latin American countries. But we've also engaged in many different fora, and I'll give you a little taste of some of the findings of the research. So first of all, I mean, one of the main things, women are underrepresented in trade, both in terms of the work that they do and the businesses that they lead. So part of that is because they work, it's occupational segregation. Women generally work in less traded sectors, so health, education, and public administration, for example. Or in terms of small business owners, they're also in things like personal services. We saw this during COVID, right? When person-to-person services closed down, many of those very small businesses were owned by women. And yet we know that trade-related jobs are higher skilled and pay better, and the firms that export are more productive. So if women are not engaged in trade and in supply chains, they are not taking advantage of those opportunities that are created by trading. Another thing that we know that is probably well known to many of you in this committee is that women-led businesses are generally smaller than those led by men. And we know that in general, smaller firms tend to trade less, right? Trading is a risky activity. There are fixed costs going into markets. And so smaller firms tend to trade less. So, that translates into an export gender gap. So when I calculated this for the G20 this year, calculating just the G20 countries to give you an idea, but these numbers are kind of similar in different countries. We see that 12% of women-led firms export, compared with 19% of men-led firms. This is overall aggregate numbers. And if we can do a gap analysis to better understand the factors that are behind this gender export gap, we find that, over a third of that gap, right, that substantial gap between the tendency to export by women-led firms compared with men-led firms. So we can, over a third of that, we can explain in terms of this occupational segregation or the sectors where women work. Just under a third, we can explain by the size of the firm. So those two factors, make up for the majority of that difference. But there are also unexplained factors that, may be, linked to gender-specific questions, unconscious bias. And so that also, for policymakers, suggests that there may be a policy response to close those gaps. So in some of the, we also, in this survey that we use that is done jointly by OECD, World Bank, and Facebook, asked what are the challenges to exporting that women business owners face. And so we looked at that, for example, in, sorry, I think I've skipped one. Okay, something's missing. That's okay. I'll okay. So yeah, so we asked about the challenges to exporting. This is we looked at the different firms in Latin America, so 7 countries in Latin America, and so we looked into what specifically women-led and men-led firms, or women business leaders and men business leaders, said is difficult for them in going on international markets. And so, we could, so, 2 things to look at here: the main challenges, but also the differences between women-led and men-led firms. So if we look at, for example, women-led firms are more likely to say that one of their challenges is understanding foreign markets. Or, for example, also women-led firms find difficult navigating foreign regulations. So there's a clear need there for more information, right? That could be obtained through informal networks, or some of the mentoring that we heard about in the last panel. But that could also be a gap in understanding and in information that could be filled by public programs as well. What we also find is when you look at the challenges to exporting, so I'm showing you this graph, which is an aggregate over 7 countries. But if we look specifically at a country, sometimes the answers are a little bit different. And this is particularly important, I think, when we're talking about translating some of these findings into policy. So if we looked at Colombia in particular, and found, and here I just want to direct your attention to one of those middle bars, which is access to the internet. There's a very big difference in Colombia between internet access for women-led firms compared with men-led firms. And when we looked into this, so this was an issue in a couple of Latin American countries. And in fact, in those countries where that was particularly signaled, the access to broadband is, the cost is particularly high in those countries. So women-led firms that are less financed, that have less access to finance, are more impacted by these more costly broadband access. And of course, we know the importance of e-commerce and accessing clients and information digitally. And so, that is going to heavily impact women-owned businesses and the ability to engage on international markets. So what we have done at the OECD in our trade and gender reviews is to suggest a kind of suite of policies that policymakers may want to consider in order to respond to some of the challenges that women face entering international markets in their country. And so, this is a list of the different policy areas. I'll just give a little bit, a small taste of what some of those might be. So, one very obvious one is in particular for micro, small, and medium enterprises is, the nuts and bolts of getting across borders. So we actually measure this at the OECD through a set of indicators that we call the trade facilitation indicators that looks at different aspects of what makes it difficult to cross borders. So here in this graph, there's a comparison of these different indicators for 4 countries. And you can see, there are slight differences. Entering and exiting certain countries is much more difficult, in particular for goods producers, than in others. And so, one obvious way for governments to, to help their entrepreneurs is to ease this possibility of doing business. Another, main policy tool in the trade policy toolbox is trade agreements. So every country negotiates trade agreements with its trading partners, and some countries include provisions that particularly target women. These might be, this might be particular market access in sectors where women are likely to be looking to export into an export market. But many of these provisions are, for example, cooperation. And so countries will engage with trading partners as to, how to ease the doing business for their women entrepreneurs and women business leaders. So here on this graph, we have, so this is from the review of Latin America. The Latin American countries have been particularly at the forefront of including gender provisions in their trade agreements. And so we've looked into what those might be. Another obvious way, we know that countries are busy negotiating trade agreements, but those tariff concessions that they manage to obtain are not always well known throughout the population and taken advantage of by, in particular, small business owners, including, women business owners. So, that's another aspect that can be considered is how to ensure that women entrepreneurs better avail themselves to those provisions and those negotiated tariff concessions. And one way that countries have done that is through trade promotion agencies. Trade promotion agencies exist in most OECD countries. And when we did the review of New Zealand, we made a number of suggestions as to how they could be more supportive of women entrepreneurs in New Zealand. And so one way is that trade promotion agencies start to look exactly at how many women are included in that they help to become trade export ready, or that are already exporting it, and that they aid in increasing their exports. So, and we discussed this with the New Zealand Trade Promotion Agency, for example, who then put into place a lot of specific programs targeting women entrepreneurs, and also going and explaining what kind of services they offer specifically in the networks where women are found, which is another way of closing this information gap that we heard about in the last panel. So I think I'll stop there just to give a little taste of what we've been doing in the trade area, and very much looking forward to the panel that is coming. And just to note, I find that the panel is super well chosen, because it's kind of it represents a lot of the challenges that we know that women face, right? So you have a services provider, many women work in services, digital inclusion, that is an obvious, response, networks. We know that women lack networks to the same extent as men, and trade promotion, we know women need those kind of services. So looking very much forward to the panel.
Thank you very much, Jane. That was a great presentation that very nicely sets up the discussion that we're about to have. And it's a great pleasure to introduce the next moderator, who is Rachel Dignam. And she is the Director of EU and International Affairs at SAGE. And she's also involved in BIAC, which is the business organization at the OECD. And so she's been involved in our committee through the BIAC. So it's a real pleasure to have her here today to moderate the session. So I'm going to pass the floor to her now. Rachel, over to you.
So thank you, David and Jane. I'm really grateful to be here today. It's been a pretty inspiring week so far, starting off with the OECD platform financing on SME sustainability on Monday, and the discussions earlier today and yesterday in the SME and Entrepreneurship Committee. The importance of private and public partnerships and the need for collective action across supply chains when it comes to empowering women entrepreneurs has been echoed throughout all of these discussions, not just this afternoon, and this really signals its importance. We've also heard a lot about the role of digital and enabling entrepreneurs to scale and grow their business, both at home and abroad, and this really resonates. Our mission at SAGE is to knock down barriers so that everyone can thrive, and we are committed to supporting and championing underrepresented entrepreneurs, especially women, with our capital, tech, time, and experience, so they can start and grow into resilient businesses. But we as one organization can only have so much impact. So again, it's really great to be here today, to be sitting on this panel alongside other corporate champions, governments, and NGOs, all coming together to share best practices and explore what more needs to be done to unlock the full potential of women entrepreneurs, to scale their business internationally, and to create more gender-inclusive supply chains. So I'll now hand over to the panelists, starting with Noreen, to briefly introduce themselves and their organizations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today alongside these other experts and women entrepreneurs. My name is Noreen Burrows. I am the founding president of OIT UK and the executive vice president of OIT International. I am also an entrepreneur, and I am the principal at Market Accents, and that is an international UK-based WeConnect certified strategic and marketing consultancy, which I founded in 2007 after a corporate career. And this focuses on international markets and trades while applying a gender lens. We help businesses research and refine their strategies and market activities to create relevant and profitable offers in crowded markets and grow. And this is mostly by harnessing digital and going global. So it's very much in line with what we're discussing today. In the UK, I also sit on the business board of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Women in Enterprise, and I chair the International Trade and Connections Task Force. I'm also on the National Women in Trade and SMEs Working Group for the National Trade Facilitation Committee. I've been active in this field for almost a decade and have been championing women in trade and global supply chains through various networks and think tanks, including Savitas, where I'm a board member, and WeConnect, in fact, very proud women-owned company. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. Sorry. Can you hear me? Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, David. Thank you, Hélène and OECD. I'm really delighted to be here today with you. My name is Andrea Dican, and I'm a French market lead of WeConnect. Just a few words about WeConnect. WeConnect is a NGO, a non-profit organization, and we connect women-owned business with a large company. And our ambition is really to create opportunities for women-owned business. And I'm delighted to be with you with this panel. And Noreen, who is a woman-owned business, we can relate of our impact in supporting women-owned business. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's such an honor to join this panel. My name is Tricia Van Orden. I'm the director of an office called the Trade Promotion Coordinating Committee. Jane's presentation was helpful, finishing with trade promotion agencies. I work for the International Trade Administration, which is the U.S. government's trade promotion agency. It's part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. In addition to our headquarters in Washington, D.C., we work directly with businesses, the vast majority of which are small businesses across the United States in 105 domestic offices. And then we also have boots on the ground in 80 markets around the world. So we help to connect small businesses with those global commercial opportunities. In addition to my role coordinating the US's strategic framework for trade promotion, which my office does by publishing the National Export Strategy, I'm also responsible for coordinating our women's economic empowerment work across the agency. And we do have a women's economic empowerment and entrepreneurship strategy. And I also co-chair our gender committee on our department's equity council. So it's a pleasure to join you.
Last one.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's definitely an honor and a privilege to be here with such interesting panel mates. So very much looking forward to this. I'm the Senior VP of Sustainability, Diversity, and Social Impact for BDC, which is the Federal Business Development Bank of Canada. So we provide loans, equity investments, and advisory services to Canadian small and medium-sized enterprises. We're a financially self-sustaining bank that is wholly owned by the federal government. We bank about just over 100,000 clients, of which just over 19% are women, even though women represent more than 50% of the population. So we see this as an opportunity and a challenge, of course. In my role at BDC, I lead sustainability, diversity, and social impact, which includes working with our business unit heads and front-facing, client-facing business leaders to develop and implement strategies that help women-owned and minority-led businesses in particular get started to grow and to thrive. And I'm looking forward to the panel. Thanks.
Thank you to all the panelists for their introductions. With such a wealth of expertise and experience on the panel, I know we're all eager to hear more about what's being done to address the gender gap in entrepreneurship, especially when it comes to enabling global trade. So starting with Tricia, can you share with us how trade missions are helping women entrepreneurs and expanding internationally? And are there any specific policies or initiatives that you'd like to call out?
Thanks for that question. So I'll start with policies and initiatives. I think what was really important was taking a moment to establish a strategy and understand what we wanted to achieve through existing programs such as trade missions, and then identify gaps where perhaps programs that were best meeting the needs of women didn't exist. We have had a gender strategy in place since the Biden-Harris administration adopted the National Strategy on Gender Equity and Equality back in October 2021. So our work goes back about 3 years. At that time, my agency did not have the data to see who our clients were from a gender perspective. And so we actually had to start by looking at data and understanding who we were serving so that we could dig deeper and understand their needs. Once we were able to do that, we found that only 7% of our clients were women-owned businesses. So obviously we had an opportunity. Once we found out that we were not perhaps equitably delivering our services to women-owned businesses, we then needed to better understand their challenges. As we've heard, there is a lot of research and information on this, and we had similar findings. We heard over and over that women lacked access to capital, information, and network. So that was not new information. But we wanted to know how we could both leverage existing tools to address those needs, and then if there was a need for new tools. Trade missions, for example, is an existing tool. The International Trade Administration leads many trade missions and participates in trade events around the world every single year. And we also partner with conference organizers to certify trade missions as well. So that's been a long-standing activity that we've participated in. However, we did not have a lot of women-owned businesses participating in our trade missions. And so about 3 years ago, we started organizing women-focused trade missions. They were specifically designed in the sectors where women have greater representation and we're more likely to be export ready or already exporting. Also in sectors where we saw good market opportunities for women. Our women-focused trade missions turned out to be extremely popular. Women not only got a lot of market information beforehand, and I will say before the pandemic, our trade missions were kind of standalone activities where you would go to a market, participate in a number of briefings and business-to-business matchmaking. But post-pandemic and understanding how important webinars and other virtual engagement was, we added long webinar series, particularly for our women-focused trade missions. Over like a 2-month period, they would have a webinar once a week to understand really in-depth details about the market, because a lot of women lacked that information and did not always feel equipped to make decisions about the best market entry strategies for themselves, for example. And so taking the time to share that market information and to give women-owned businesses a lot of context about the market ended up equipping them to be more successful when they actually went on the trade mission. We do set up business-to-business matchmaking. We fully vet potential partners. We also hear that a lot of women-owned businesses have different perceptions of risk. And so being able to fully vet helps to offset some of the risks that they may encounter entering into markets. And then one unintended consequence of this is that women enjoyed being on the missions together. So in addition to the contacts that they were making in market and all the business-to-business matchmaking, the women who went together on the mission enjoyed learning from each other. There was a lot of peer-to-peer exchange. And so that was another great benefit of our women-focused mission. So we've now done about 3 women-focused missions a year for the last 3 years. And again, we have now outstripped demand for them, and they've been really successful in helping to get women into markets and make those connections.
It's great to hear of such a comprehensive approach. And one of the things that you called out was access to capital, which segues really nicely into Sandra. So could you tell us a bit about the role of financial institutions and if there's any activities from the BDC that you'd like to spotlight?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I have a lot of questions here at your trade missions, though. But well, so as a starting point, I think it's important to recognize that expanding into global markets really does require a lot for a small business owner. It requires a lot of time, effort, and human resources, as well as money, whether it's a male or female led. So, not all companies are ready when they're really small to do this, but they reach a point where it's important for them. If they want to achieve sustainable growth and not just one-off deals, it's important for them to consider markets outside the home market. And of course, financial institutions play an important role making this happen. And when I talk about financial institutions, I'm talking about commercial banks, public development banks, which is what BDC is, and of course, export credit agencies. And at the BDC, we work very closely with our sister agency, which is Export Development Canada, EDC, which is Canada's export credit agency. And we work in very close partnership to support small business owners as they try to expand. So as the business expands, bank financing is a primary source of funds. It supports acquisitions, equipment purchases, and of course, working capital to meet operating expenses. And at BDC, we can offer fixed-term loans, short and long-term loans, and commercial banks would offer things like lines of credit and asset-based loans. Whereas export credit agencies are where you get those offerings are complemented with things like trade credit insurance, trade finance, and bonding services. So one of the things, and this was touched on by Tricia, and certainly we talked about it in a session yesterday, is that we find that the needs of women entrepreneurs and any entrepreneur really go well beyond just the financial services. As a company begins to scale for global expansion, they need to be aware of the benefits of going beyond borders. They need the knowledge and skills to invest in whatever market it is with confidence, which is very interesting about your webinar series. So we do play a role, again, with EDC of connecting our entrepreneurs to support organizations, to some of our partner organizations, in order to really make sure that the entrepreneurs receive sort of a wraparound type of service. A couple of places where we particularly lean into supporting women entrepreneurs when they are ready for export is one of our business lines is advisory services. So within advisory services, we actually have an advisory service package that offers expert guidance to help entrepreneurs expand, well, to enter international markets or expand their businesses in those markets. So it's things like international readiness assessments, market selection support, market entry and expansion plans, partner identification, and onboarding. So it's basically a little consulting package that we offer, not just to women, but it's certainly something that is popular with women entrepreneurs who are looking internationally. At the end of the day, we want our client companies to grow sustainably and scale globally. And then the last thing I'll mention is the work that we do, because we also do equity investing. So we have a few tools that we use for equity investment specifically towards women. So we have a $500 million pool of capital called the Thrive Platform that includes $300 million investment pool where we are investing in Canadian, they have to be Canadian-based, women-led or majority women-owned companies that require equity financing. And in many cases, these are the companies who are looking for international investors, as well as in many cases looking at international markets right from the get-go. So we sit on their boards, we connect them with other advice and investors in order for them to scale up and succeed. And of course, we introduce them to partner organizations. We also have the Thrive Lab, which is female-led businesses looking to deliver social impact. And again, this is a $100 million investment pool. And with this money, we are investing in these basically impact-driven women-led organizations. And because of the desire to deliver impact, many of these are actually looking at foreign markets, international developing markets. So a lot of possibilities there for women entrepreneurs looking to trade internationally through a number of different BDC support services. Thanks.
Thank you. It's great to hear about the breadth of not just the financial support, but also the complementary partnerships going beyond finance to expert support and guidance. Noreen, can you tell us a bit about the networks and associations such as OWIT and how they're supporting women entrepreneurs in accessing global supply chains?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. I've been listening and taking notes because I like what I'm hearing on that side. So where do we come in as a network association? And actually, we are an NGO as well. I'm representing OWIT, which is the Organization of Women in International Trade. We are an important part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and we actually play an important role in supporting women entrepreneurs in accessing the global supply chains, because we actually offer a range of resources, capacity building, networking opportunities, and actually practical tailored support. This is not just us, but the networks and associations within this ecosystem. Such networks actually act as critical enablers because we're bridging the gaps. We're providing the essential support at multiple levels, and these are fostering the growth of the women-owned businesses in global supply chains. So whilst each organization is doing something different, together we're actually enhancing the overall ecosystem by providing the access, signposting, making sure inclusivity is there, making it more efficient, and actually bringing innovation into the name of the game. I'm going to talk a bit about OWIT and bring it in as an example. Through its chapters, it actually functions as a connector, an advocate, an educator, and a facilitator. For those of you new to OWIT, it is a global membership organization. It is open to men and women, all working in international trade. And we've got chapters across the Americas, Africa, and Europe, and also virtual. We promote the advancement of women in trade and business, and we actually occupy both a strategic and a practical role because we're focusing on the professional development, the capacity building. We do mentorship, we share information and best practice, we do training, signposting, and support. So it's a lot of things that you were talking about, which actually women entrepreneurs find that they need. And obviously we are women entrepreneurs ourselves, so we know what we want and we actually put it forward on the table. We also advocate for and contribute to thought leadership, advisory, formulation, development, and implementation of the gender inclusive trade policies. And I was delighted to see your slides earlier on. I'll pick up on that a bit later on. OIT is one of the many BSOs or business support organizations globally that support as well as facilitate opportunities for women entrepreneurs. We act as a springboard, and we also make it easier to have that vital access. I'm going to just touch on a few of those roles and actually open them up because I think it's important to talk about how they actually manifest themselves. Connectors. I've said we're a connecting point among various stakeholders, the women entrepreneurs, corporations, and in fact, organizations like We Connect, which are bringing the buyers into that ecosystem, the governments, and we work very closely with governments in the countries where we have our chapters, financial institutions, the banks, all the FIs, and we try to work with them as well. And other trade organizations, such as like the ICC, the WTO, we try to ensure we've got good levels of synchronization there. So we're facilitating the relationships to help the women entrepreneurs gain access to the right contacts, the right partnerships, the right markets. We're getting that collaborative network that actually enables the business growth. And I think that is a really good, important use of what the association is doing in the ecosystem. We're talking a lot about education, and in the session before, it was one of the important points which came out. In our role, we see ourselves as actually signposting to capacity building. We don't necessarily do the training directly ourselves, but we do actually partner with organizations that provide that. And that has come true in various countries where our chapters operate. And in the UK, work closely with the chapter, with the Chartered Institute of Export and International Trade. In the US, there's a lot of other organizations. And we train, especially looking across Africa, where we've got a lot of chapters which are opening up. This is such a great demand. And actually both SheTrades, ICC, they have all responded to that need for the capacity building and education. We actually advocate and do policy influencing. So we try to shape policy that actually works for us. And how do we do that? We actually collaborate with the policymakers. We advocate for a reduction of trade barriers where necessary, and also try to introduce or talk about incentives for corporations to diversify their supplier base, and actually have in place policy changes that make it easier for women to be part of those supply chains, scale up, and access those new markets or existing markets. And we do this sometimes through research. We do this by participating in the conversations, be they on a global level or actually in a more local level within our own countries. We facilitate market access. We signpost and provide women with the practical pathways to market entry. And you were talking about the trade fair. Someone was mentioning the trade missions, and that's such an important route. And as you said, women entrepreneurs don't always know about it. They don't have the time to see it. So we try to, where possible, get that information back in front of the women entrepreneurs. So this is why I said we're a conduit, we're a facilitator. We actually signpost quite a lot. And we try to also organize ourselves and participate in matchmaking events and work with our partners, such as We Connect and We Bank and other areas where we know the buyers will be there and that conversation can take place. So this direct support really enables women-owned businesses to showcase their products, join the supply chains, and okay, it may be small part where maybe a tier 3 or beyond where we're actually joining, but at least we're getting a foothold in that supply chain to be able to start working and understand what we need to do to actually be viable for buyers to invest in us and include us in the supply chains. And for the buyers, we actually bring fresh perspectives, the innovation, the products. A lot of times they may actually be ignored completely and not considered. Because digital is so important at the moment, we try to make sure that our entrepreneurs recognize the importance of digital tools and capital access and actually upskill themselves to be able to harness a lot of the digital benefits that are coming through. And digital is in fact one of the pillars for OIT. It's important that we can actually leverage the digital platforms, which are increasingly crucial in supply chains, be they through our partners or through the ecosystem themselves. And this includes also with the financial resources, because we obviously need those to be able to still participate within the market. So we are looking to try to get women-led businesses within our chapters and even outside our chapters, because we actually work across. We're very collaborative, so we're not closing rank, we're opening up. And we want them to adopt the technology to be able to grow sustainably and enhance that ecosystem overall. So to summarize, I think we're a very important link in that overall chain, and we're working with key stakeholders to make sure it stays open and we can push ourselves along the chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen. I really love that whole ecosystem approach with a focus on education, digital, and also really the need for policy change. Andrea, how does WeConnect, through its partnerships and initiatives, promote women accessing international markets?
Thank you so much. And it's amazing how you are doing that job. And yeah, I think it's a collective work. For what I understand, it's really collective how we do it. WeConnect is a global network, as I was saying, and it was founded 20 years ago by Elizabeth Velasquez. And the idea is really to connect women-owned business and large organization. And we do it. I will start first by the initiative we are running currently. We partner with such as JP Morgan to support women-owned business. So we put in place a program where we support 100 women-owned business by training. We train them, we mentor them with a mentorship program as well. And the idea is to really try to put money in the hand of women-owned business by connect them to the large organization. We have also another program with Disney currently, which is a mentorship for 20 women. And the idea is to really train them. We talk about education this morning, and it's really to train them and to give them tools in order to get access to the market, to go to how to go to the global market, as Sandra was saying as well. It's really to train them, to equip them with tools to support them in their daily activities. In terms of partnership, we partner with SAP Ariba, for example, to set up our community platform. It's a platform where you can find a large company, they came and they put their offers. You have also women on business, they go to the platform and they try to find the opportunity. We update it regularly, and it's a worldwide platform. So WeConnect is today, it's about 200 partners, buyers. It's also 20,000 of women on business globally. And what we have also, it's a collaboration with La French Tech here in France. And the idea is really to promote all topics around supplier diversity. As we know, it's really important to promote diversity and inclusion in the supply chain. So with La French Tech, which is like a big ecosystem of startup, we work closely with them. We have another collaboration with American Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, where we champion as well as supplier diversity. And in order to, we see also in the figures this morning, they are really ahead. So we try to learn from them because it's, as I was saying, it's really a collaborative work, and we need to support each other and to try to give more accessibility to women-owned business. It's also about capacity building, and all effort is really mattered in order to make it work and to close the gap, I would say.
Thank you, Andrea. It's really clear we need to connect and take a more collaborative approach. We need to engage all of the actors included in women's economic empowerment, and that includes the government, private sector, NGOs, and really need to work together to address these key challenges to unlock markets and create a more enabling business environment for women entrepreneurs. And I'll now hand over the question to all of the panelists, starting with Sandra, to really explore how we can strengthen and promote public-private partnerships to create more inclusive trade.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned in my sorry, you should know by now, right? As mentioned earlier, so BDC is part of a trade ecosystem in Canada that includes the Trade Commissioner Service, the Export Development Canada, but we also partner with a number of different women enterprise organizations, supplier diversity councils, and of course, financial institutions. And I was trying to surreptitiously check if we're still a member of WeConnect. I think we are, but I know at one point we were, and it's definitely an organization which does some excellent work in this regard as well. So we really believe that there's a lot of power in getting the different organizations together and providing in that manner a range of services to the entrepreneurs. We also see nationally some big things that Canada has done federally to make advancing gender equality a priority. And this, of course, also both creates the culture and the ecosystem around this stuff, but also provides some really important tactical and practical supports. So certainly the government of Canada is one of those governments that Jane had mentioned in her opening comments, who have included gender equality considerations in international trade agreements. So we have a standalone chapter on trade and gender in trade agreements, and we've also mainstreamed gender equality considerations in one or more sections of free trade agreements. So at the country level, this is definitely a priority. And then when it comes to direct impact on companies, the Trade Commissioner's Service has launched a really interesting initiative called Business Women in International Trade. And so the aim of that program is to provide support to Canadian women-owned and women-led businesses by helping them access international export opportunities. And through this BWIT program, some of the services include participation in international business delegations and events, access to funding programs, so information about them, but also making sure that women are connected to the appropriate funding program to support their particular international trade aspirations, trade-related webinars and accelerator programs, and supplier diversity opportunities. So this is an interesting one where the federal government wants to make sure to support women entrepreneurs in accessing contracts with governments and Fortune 500 companies who are deliberately looking for more diversity in their supply chain. So we help match those companies and government departments that are looking for a more diverse roster of people applying to be suppliers to women entrepreneurs who want to participate. In the coming year, the Trade Commissioner Service is planning to support more than 40 tailored initiatives that are intended to promote and facilitate export opportunities for Canadian women entrepreneurs in markets around the world. So we see, bottom line is we see activity and opportunities for partnership for us as BDC across the board, right from the federal government level. I didn't even get into what provinces are doing because we have 10 provinces and they're all doing something different, but there's certainly stuff at all levels and a lot of opportunity to sort of grow the pie by partnering effectively. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And Tricia, from your perspective, how can we amplify this collective action?
Sure. There's just so many opportunities for partnership because there's so many challenges to address. So I will say, I think we're really lucky in the United States because we have a coordinating mechanism. There's so many resources available to women-owned businesses, and we have a way to coordinate so that all of those federal resources are really brought to bear to meet their needs. So the office I run, the Trade Promotion Coordinating Committee, creates that framework. And our most recent national export strategy that had been released last year, the first chapter was focused on diversifying the U.S. exporter base. And so by setting that top line priority, we were then able to marshal all the resources across the federal government to address that strategy. My colleagues at the U.S. Small Business Administration are huge players here. Folks have mentioned the women's business centers at the U.S. Department of Commerce. We also have what are called enterprising women of color business centers. And so there's just so many different resources available. And when we all have the same goal, it's much easier to raise awareness about those resources and then to take advantage of partnerships as multipliers to get the word out into communities. So that's one way that we are strengthening our partnership across the federal government. I also have to say we're very lucky. We have an official mechanism to coordinate with state governments. Every single U.S. state has a trade promotion agency, and we are required by law to establish state-specific export promotion coordination plans with them, which does create a lot of work. However, it creates an official mechanism to share information and to keep everyone abreast of what the federal government priorities are. And most state governments want to help support federal government priorities. And so again, we have a mechanism to coordinate and to establish joint priorities. And we've seen our states be very enthusiastic about being part of the goal to expand the diversity of U.S. exporters. And so it's working very well at the state and federal and state level. We also leverage a lot of strategic partnerships with the private sector. Being a business-facing agency, we have a lot of flexibility in the types of strategic partnerships we establish. Basically, if any corporate entity says that they will help us promote our services, we can enter into a strategic partnership with them. So a couple of these help us meet women entrepreneurs where they are. So you might recognize programs such as the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women program or the Tory Burch Foundation's webinars for women entrepreneurs. Probably more people have heard of Tory Burch than the International Trade Administration. And so rather than expecting them to sign up for our webinar, they'll sign up for the Tory Burch webinar. The Tory Burch Foundation had never provided training to women entrepreneurs on trade. And so that was the service and the expertise that we could bring. So again, leveraging partnerships to go to where women are has really helped us expand the community that we're reaching and to share the capacity building, because our agency does do direct capacity building and training. And so those have been important partnerships. I also want to say that we are partners with both OWIT and We Connect. Again, anyone that's out there serving women entrepreneurs, we have a joint mission. And so it's very easy to enter into partnerships since we have those goals. I think that it's very difficult for women-owned small businesses to understand what the expectations of large corporations are from a corporate procurement perspective. And so We Connect's expertise and training programs are so helpful. We also promote women pursuing women-owned business certification. And so again, We Connect, we can promote that as a concept, and We Connect delivers that training. And so it's been a really fruitful partnership. And then our partnership with OWIT has taken many different forms, and we can be very creative. But we've really leveraged OWIT to create the kind of women-to-women connections. And so we can bring together women from all over the world. For women who want to learn more about a potential market, make contacts in a potential market, OWIT provides that connectivity. And so it's been, again, a very fruitful partnership. So those are just a couple of the ways that we're leveraging partnerships, and we still have so many more to establish and pursue.
Thank you, Andrea. And Noreen, speaking of this joint approach, from your perspective, how and where do you view these public and private partnerships to really drive a difference?
Thank you. It's a pleasure coming after you. And yes, we do work very closely with most of the governments, actually, where the OWIT chapters are present. I will talk even about the UK government, because we're working very closely with them. When I was looking at this question, I actually answered it holistically. I come with a list of demands, so I hope you don't mind. So the ecosystem can truly only flourish when there is partnership that takes place between the governments, financial institutions, the multinational corporations, and the other stakeholders who actually work in this space, because that's the way we can get inclusivity, innovation, and actually a positive environment with equitable access to global opportunities. I know it sounds easy putting it like that, but I know also that it isn't, because we've proven it's hard to actually get there. But if we actually do a combined effort, and we put in quite a lot of what's been talked about today, including the FTAs, all the work that's been done by the governments, we can actually continue to push ourselves along there. So from OWIT's perspective, where can we go? What do we see in this? We believe that a range of partnerships across the key stakeholders, and as I said, this does include the NGOs, the governments, the trade bodies, the civil societies, and ourselves are one, and the private industry. I mean, in the UK, we have seen a number of initiatives actually in this space, including the Alison Rose Review, which then gave way for the establishment of the Invest in Women Code, which then went on to actually influence the WIFI Code. And we've got the Invest in Women Hub, and there's the Invest in Women Task Force. There's the APPG in Women and Enterprise, where I'm sitting on the board. So we do a lot of work there. And these are all public and private partnerships. And actually, it's with women entrepreneurs like ourselves who are sitting there and driving them and actually taking them forward. So all these programs are all actually giving rise to areas where we need to focus on, including the unconscious bias in the system. I think you were talking about that, of which there's quite a lot. And actually, now that we are beginning to see data coming through, and you were talking about the FTAs and the gender chapters, and it's good that we have the gender chapters in we're actually beginning to see them being implemented, so we can actually see what the effect of them is, even though they're still in very early days. But that is all going to help us to actually isolate where there is the unconscious bias still at play. And we know within the financial industry still suffers from it. There's a lot of sectors which still suffer from it. So all the trade missions, all the work that's being done to push into those sectors is great at actually moving that down. And actually, it's the infrastructure itself sometimes that is not gender neutral and actually works against the women entrepreneurs. What else would we see? I think there's the awareness of the promotion and the visibility of the weebies. Sorry, I call us weebies, women business owners, in the policy making and along that value chain. And it is important that we have the role models and we have the visibility of the role models. I go back once again to the UK. We've got the export champions. They're actually promoted and we do see them, but it's not enough. There's still a lot more that needs to be done, especially in sectors like the mining, like the construction, all the very male-oriented sectors where we do not have the visibility. And once they are in the supply chain, it's good for them to be talked about, even by the corporates, that they have the women-owned businesses within them, because that is where we can get more collaboration and more discussion going around women in the supply chains and how they're impacting. Sometimes I think they're hidden under a stone, aren't they? And they're very hard to get data out of them in terms of how many women they actually have in the supply chain and how are they progressing and what has been the impact in terms of profitability. And this does lead me on to data, which I will come back to. We need an actual enabling and inclusive environment that gathers policy, legislation, and trade. So this comes back to the gender trade agreements, the gender chapters. As a statement, I mean, there's only about a third of all the free trade agreements at the moment at the WTO that have the gender chapter. So there's still a lot of work. You know, we've had, as we mentioned, Canada, you're one of the leading countries that have had it for a long time. So we look to you to actually give us some learnings because you can actually see the impact of the data that you have had. And I know the UK has been, now we have 3 gender chapters in implementation. We're talking with the EU. There's the region like the CPTTP. Sorry, I need to think about that. And that's been doing a lot of work in terms of actually promoting the gender chapters and what they could be done. And that is obviously good learnings because the countries that are joining these blocks can actually look and think about introducing those gender chapters in their own FTAs. So these are all work which we need to be seeing more of. And that is, for me, a lot of where government comes in with private in terms of the implementation as well. And we obviously need more ongoing investment in the enabling digital tools and infrastructure. If I can't get on the internet because I'm in the middle of a countryside, I'm not going to be global. I'm not going to be accessing anything, let alone even learning how to upskill myself and make use of the financial tools and the digital markets. So we need that to be there, and we need more investment coming from the governments into these infrastructures. And then we also have the access and innovation in the financial products. It's been talked about. I don't think there's enough financial products that actually tailor for women-owned businesses. And it's not just a matter of, I know we're mainstreamed, they're there for SMEs. We know there's specific needs and there's certain areas where there can be more tailoring for them. So we need that to be put back again on the table. And if they understand the needs of the women-owned businesses and the female founders that want to scale up and they cater for them, we'd be moving ahead to filling that gap that David mentioned at the start, which was quite a large number. And many of these things can happen in tandem. We're not talking of things that are just taking place with the government or only with the private sector. They do take place together. And because we actually get then the public and private sector partnerships together, we're leveraging the resources, we're actually enabling more of an ecosystem, and we can see more of those inclusive trade missions take place and more awareness campaigns where we have women role models being put out. I think, Doctor, you were talking about that earlier on. And obviously, we want to see more sustainable initiatives and inclusive trade practices. And here we talk about some things that impact a lot of the women, such as climate, because we know that they are the ones that bear that brunt, and there's also the risk. And if the risk can be mitigated, then we can see more of them being productive within the supply chain instead of just trying to survive. You want businesses to scale up and move out of maybe being a lifestyle business to actually being a business that's growing and pushing forward. And I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Noreen. That was a lot of great suggestions for what can be further leveraged, notably on the impact of having digital tools and data and the inclusion of gender chapters in free trade agreements. Andrea, last but not least, would you like to come in with your perspective on the global partnership in promoting inclusive trade?
Yes, of course. Thank you. What I wanted to highlight here is what we know is women invest the majority of their income in the family and in the community. So it's beneficial for everyone to support women and also to have an inclusive trade ecosystem by reducing all barriers for women-owned business. So just I wanted to put this here. The first thing is to enable them to have access to capital. I have another activity as business angel, and I can see we don't invest in a women-owned business. We invest more in men business. So we really need to close this gap and try to enable access to capital for women. We need also to provide more market opportunities as we do with WeConnect. And regarding digital as well, digital inclusion is really key to support digital infrastructure and to be more equitable in the access for tools and for the platform we had for WeConnect, for example. I would also add that the fact of promoting supplier diversity is key because the figures are really incredible. It's women earn less than 1% of global spend, only 1%. So it is not so good. We need to do something on that, and promoting supplier diversity is really key to help them to get to the market, to get the global opportunities, and we will make it happen through joint effort in training, mentorship, and capacity building, as we were saying before. Women entrepreneurs they gain resource and connection as well, what they need to succeed in global supply chain. Connection is really key, open connection and opportunity for them. And it is what will really be a game changer for them. That's what I wanted to say on that.
Thank you, Andrea. I don't think any of us are surprised to hear how important and key private and public partnerships are. Everyone on this panel has unique abilities, expertise, and knowledge to enable women entrepreneurs to really scale and scale their businesses in international markets. But everyone will be much more powerful if we work together. And I think with the spirit of time, we might as well open up to the floor for questions. So if anyone wants to raise their flags, and I think you'll check online as well. Thank you. Yes, Kimberly.
Good afternoon, and thank you, panelists, for the great session, great information. I have a quick comment and then a question. So the first comment is funding. Many women-owned businesses, we're service businesses, and we're small. We're looking for small amounts of funding. Are there sources of funding under $1 million to work overseas? I have not seen many sources. Normally, we're told that the due diligence is, we do have to do the same due diligence for a $50 million project versus a $500,000 project. So I think women, we are impacted much more by that because, as Andrea mentioned, our businesses are small. So many of us are going to be completely left out if that doesn't change on the way we do due diligence for funding. And then the other thing that, so you all are focused on the same things, you're in different countries, you have a different approach. Are you working together? For example, if there's an initiative in New Zealand where there's funding for women-owned businesses, and then the UK has an initiative, is it possible for UK and New Zealand to work together? You know, we have a business, woman-owned business here in UK that could potentially work with the business in New Zealand. It seems like maybe there's opportunity just to start one by one, looking at one business and just making these deals kind of happen. So those are my comments, questions.
Thank you. It's interesting you've said that, Kimberly. And I will pick up on the UK New Zealand example in this case, where we know we've got a free trade agreement that has actually come online. I'm looking at the UK team there. So that is now in force. And actually, we were participating when they had the UK Japan implementation meeting, and there were actually sorry, I'm talking Japan, not New Zealand. I do apologize. And they had the women business owners who were speaking and asking questions and wanted to connect. So now I'm expecting and hoping that that will actually happen. And I know with the UK, New Zealand as well, there were the same similar opportunities. I think it's baby steps, and hopefully there would be more coming along, but they're still really only just come online now. So you can't expect to see that. But I think it's the ask, and we need to put the ask forward and say we want to be put in touch, because then if we ask, then maybe it will happen. Organizations such as ours, and I'll pick up again back on OIT, we do try to put businesses together. So where we have chapters, we will put businesses in touch. And that's some of our own matchmaking, so that you can speak, you can find more suppliers if you actually need to source suppliers. But I still say we're very small in a large wheel, small cogs. And to actually get there, it's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of time. Are we coordinated? Probably not as much as we should be. Have we started coordinating? I think there is a little bit of coordination, yes.
Kimberly, thank you for your question. I wanted to raise something on financing, similar to your comment about needing smaller amounts for financing. I also find that many women fund their companies through personal savings or family savings. And so they're not creating a banking relationship off the get-go. And so when they have the opportunity to grow their businesses, it is very challenging to access financing. And perhaps you've even experienced this. I've heard this a lot anecdotally from women who are being very successful through that growth period. But then that door is kind of closed to them. So I think that's a similar problem to the one that you have raised. So I think when it comes to financial literacy, and I kind of love your comments on this as well, is helping women business owners and women entrepreneurs better understand their own risk perception related to financing. Because of course, access to finance is one thing, but if women think even trying to access finance is risky and don't even do it, that's a different problem that kind of needs a different solution. So I think that's an area for more outreach training and partnerships, is just, a kind of better understanding of that risk response to financing. And then I do think that you should chat with our SBA friends, because your question has been recognized as a challenge. And so there's a pilot program that SBA is rolling out, focused more on working capital needs. That's not just for domestic or international sales, but combines them. So it can be more responsive. So you don't need that term loan, but rather working capital, depending on where the sale is going, which hasn't been something that's in the United States been on offer with SBA guarantees. So I'm happy to say there's maybe something for you to follow up with there. The last thing on your question about kind of just directly bringing together women, we are trying, from the Department of Commerce perspective, we are trying to integrate women's business conferences into almost every international engagement that we have for that very purpose. So leveraging our commercial diplomatic presence to bring together local women business communities whenever we're bringing U.S. women overseas, so we can do that matchmaking and identify those opportunities and just have a larger Rolodex of women to help with that. So thank you for the suggestion. And as Noreen said, it is something that we are actively working to improve.
I believe the trade wins, don't you? You have those events, because exactly. We've taken part in some of them, and they are actual areas. I was also saying there are some countries that have like microloans that actually start to try to get that financing going, but most of the financial institutions are not interested or haven't picked up on that yet. So this is something that definitely needs to be put on the table. And I'd like to pick up a bit on what you said and find out more about that. Thank you.
Just to give a few thoughts on some of those questions. So at the OECD, we maybe take a more international perspective. So not particularly necessarily in loans and financing in the US, but I know of a very interesting program by the International Finance Corporation that is more in kind of middle income countries, where the International Finance Corporation actually guarantees loans in domestic banks that are given to women. So there's an incentive for domestic banks in maybe 150 countries to actually lend to women business leaders. And these are exactly the types of loans that you're talking about. They're bigger than microfinance, but they're not yet what would be called like interesting business for a larger commercial bank. And this is exactly the difficulty, right, of women business leaders. And just to bring up your point, take up your point on the working together part. So I know some of these trade missions actually try and do that. I know there was an all-women trade mission that went from New Zealand to Australia recently, and there have been also in EU Canada, they bring women entrepreneurs from one to the other to share experience, to network, to do this kind of business to business matchmaking. I think it's at the beginning, but this is the kind of cooperation that can be built up through trade agreements, through implementation cooperation in trade agreements. But I would say it's starting.
Also on smaller grants, I wanted to come in and give a bit of a stage perspective because we partner with the BOSS Network in the US. And so far we've committed 1.5 million. And it's about making venture capital more accessible to entrepreneurs. And it includes smaller grants of around $10,000, but also 12 months of mentorship and training. And are there any other questions from the floor? Yes.
Thanks. Just to, I'm with the Business Development Bank, kind of just to complement some of what Sandra shared with you, because I think on the challenge we see with small business, like, can we segment it a little bit? Like when we talk about a sub $2 million company, as a rule of thumb, we don't usually recommend that sub $2 million companies start internationalizing because they don't have the capacity, like the strength. And so that's a real challenge, because if you're talking, I'd be curious, when you talk about the size of businesses, what size does that represent for women businesses? Because generally what we find in Canada, sub 2 million companies, if they're manufacturing, like anything less than 5 million for manufacturers, they typically don't have the staying power to actually continue. Because one of the we talk about is sustainable growth, and that's critical for any of the companies. We don't just want to go on a mission and they don't have the capacity to continue. So we're very sensitive about that staying power. So if it's a technology company, maybe 2 to 5 million, perhaps, but sub 2 is a general rule of thumb. We're very sensitive because they don't have that capacity to continue. And there's a lot of, it's a challenge, but if that's one of the constraints, I think that has to be a solution found. But generally is really like 2 to 5, 5 to 10, you start getting into capacity to grow. But I don't think in terms of building critical mass is something that we always look at too, whether it's with women entrepreneurs or male entrepreneurs as well. But those are key segments. And again, I'm curious, when you say small companies, like generally, what are the size of the women entrepreneurs that we're dealing with here? Because if it's sub 2, as a general rule of thumb, we find that they have a very hard time internationalizing. We wouldn't recommend actually that they internationalize because they don't have the staying power.
So I think, it depends very much on the sector. So you mentioned manufacturing. There aren't very many, I think, women business leaders in manufacturing firms. And yeah, I mean, there's, when the data is certainly there. When you look at, I mean, in many countries, there's not the same definition in every country of what is a small business. But, in many countries, it's also depends on the number of employees. So we're not only looking at working capital or turnover, it's also number of employees. And I think it very much depends on the sector. I mean, there are some small firms today, especially in the tech sector, that are kind of born global. Again, not very many women business leaders in those sectors. And, if you're looking at venture capital, in some countries, say in many European countries, maybe 10 to 12% of venture capital goes to women founders, right? So there aren't very many women in that sector either. But yeah, I think it depends very much on the sector and what product exactly is being sold. Another thing that we find is that digital platforms have opened to a lot of small businesses possibility to sell abroad. We see this even in Latin America. These are quite small firms, but since they're using digital platforms to actually sell their goods, they're starting in one market or maybe two. I think it also depends on the size of the market that you're coming from, right? In Canada, maybe there's enough market to absorb some kind of specialty product. If you're in Colombia, maybe less so. If you have a specialty product, you're going to need to go global more quickly. So, I mean, I think this question is very context specific, but my basic answer is there is no definition of what a small business is that works, across different countries.
I'd like to just add a comment. It is the forgotten area, isn't it? It's the gap in the market. If you don't have the financing to grow, you're not going to grow, you will remain small. And if you actually have the opportunities and the orders may start coming through, yes, there's a scaling up issue, but if it was grouping together, and this is an issue we've discussed many times with We Connect, where we have a number of buyers coming together to try to go in for the larger tenders. And there are ways around it, and you've got to scale up. In order to scale up, you need to have the opportunity to scale up. When banks just close the door, you've just firmly closed that opportunity. So I'd like to just put on the table, it's the forgotten, underserved gap. Thanks.
Unfortunately, it's time to close this session, but I wanted to say thank you again to all of the panelists and everyone else around the table. This discussion has definitely inspired new ideas and perspectives, especially when it comes to public and private partnerships and how we can really work together with our collective networks, policies, capital, skills, and trainings to really lower the gender trade gap. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.